Hi there, it's Ron Gula from Gula Tech Adventures. Today we're continuing our VC 101 series and we're talking about company pivots. Now, a company pivot is when you're doing one thing, like perhaps you're a fishing boat, and you change your strategy and now you're a fishing tours boat. And same boat, same captain, same ocean, same fish, but you're in the tourist industry versus trying to, basically catch fish and make a profit that way. A pivot is when you have a change in strategy for how you are going to market. Could be a customer pivot, could be how you're selling, could be a wide variety of things. We're going to talk about this. As an investor, when I talk to other investors and you talk about the history of a company, they might say, hey, they pivoted and now they do this. Well, some people look at that as a negative connotation, right? People want to have a perfection, right? A great founder, great business plan, great funding, they go out and get their customers, and then they're sold for $1 billion, right? Doesn't always happen that way. Along the way, you might learn about other opportunities for your technology. You might realize you had barriers you didn't know, and maybe you pivot into a different industry. So we're going to talk about this and hopefully remove some of the negative connotations of being a pivot. First of all, I'd rather you pivot to success than go out of business and start over again, right? So there's a lot of things that can go on here. First thing I want to talk about is just a customer pivot. Now, let's assume you have some sort of widget you're selling and you're trying to sell to a certain set of customers. Let's say hospitals, let's say the federal government, let's say telecom. And you find all of a sudden that this technology and solution that you've created, some other market completely loves it much, much, much better. So let's say it's academic, say it's the automotive industry, but this is a tough pivot for organizations because maybe you're a doctor and you've created a company, that solves problems for doctors, and all of a sudden you find out that lawyers really, really like this, and you're just uncomfortable selling to them. But a lot of times this happens, and it's a big deal. In our cybersecurity industry, what often happens is we talk about getting product market fit in the large enterprise, mid-market, or small business. And maybe even do you want to, a solution you thought you were selling to large banks becomes really, really popular for small banks. And selling to these different types of organization, it implies a lot of different ways of going to market, perhaps with pricing, perhaps with how the technology works. And so same product, different customer, that's a pivot. It's absolutely a pivot. Now, another thing that I've seen organizations go through is their product does an amazing number of things. It's almost a Swiss Army knife. And they find out that, customers really only like the blade. They just like the corkscrew. They just like the knife. They just like the screwdriver that's in there. I've seen a lot of large enterprise customers, who have a product that does everything, really try to focus on maybe just one thing and bring that to the entire large market that's out there. I've also seen a lot of services companies that, they might have a core technology and they do a lot of customization and they realize that, wow, I've got 10 customers and I've had to heavily customize it, but they're all using this one thing here. Why don't I just sell that one thing to 1 million customers and try to do that? So that's often a pivot when you leave technology on the table and you pare down what you're doing to focus just on that. And then lastly, another kind of pivot is when you pivot the delivery. So for example, let's say you have a technology and your technology is best sold through a third party. Now that third party could be an other equipment manufacturer, an OEM. It could be a service provider. It could be where you have to hire somebody else to consult and implement your product. Well, this is kind of a delivery pivot in there where you have the technology, you're focused on the technology, but how you deliver it changes. Now, when I was running Tenable, we actually switched from perpetual licensed software to software as a service, SaaS, that we all know and love today in 2023. That was a huge pivot, right? Same product, same technology, but completely different end user license agreement, completely different customer relationship, completely different sales cycle, and whatnot. I often see a lot of people who will sell to the enterprise, and then they might run into some fierce competition, and then they'll switch to the SMB, small business, and maybe it's the same technology, but they will then sell through managed service providers or managed security service providers. That's a pivot. That takes a lot of focus and a lot of effort to do this. Now, how often does this happen? It happens enough that I want to dedicate a whole video to it. It's not a failure when you do this. If you recognize that you've got customers who want your technology, they want to buy a certain way, go for it, adopt it. I think the biggest mistake is when I see organizations who sense they have some sort of opportunity out there and they just they don't go all into it. They don't transfer their company. Now this happens the opposite too, where you go all in on something. Let's say the move from enterprise to SMB, you might abandon some enterprise customers, and that might cost you some friendships, some political costs, and some goodwill. But you can't be everything to everybody. And working with a customer doesn't mean you're going to work with them the rest of their life. They might drop you in a second if a better opportunity comes along. This is what commerce and capitalism is all about. Now, when you spin to a different pivot, when you pivot here, it might imply you need some more funding. Now, let's say you have a great X-ray technology and you're going to then go into portable X-rays. Maybe you have the patents and you have the ability, but maybe you need an investor who's done more commodity X-rays. And I'm kind of pulling that one out there as an example. But in cyber, this happens all the time. If you're going to pivot with a technology to go after small business, you typically want to get investors who have partnerships with secondary small business channels, third-party management vendors like ConnectWise and Enable. That's something that you might imply. It might also imply that you have to spin this technology out. And then the same way you might be losing some customers, you might have employees who really want to sell to a certain customer a certain way. They might not like this approach. Maybe you have an employee who's helping you in a very consultative type of manner, and you're moving to a more productized manner where everybody's buying the same thing. You don't need to have that sort of hands-on pro services sale. So there's all these things can happen, and I've seen a lot of companies get paralyzed by not taking these kind of opportunities seriously, or trying to make everybody happy, and you can't. You have to focus on what problem you're trying to solve, and solve it accordingly. Now, this is prevalent enough that this happens even in our portfolio. So we're recording this right now in May of 2023, and we've got 4 companies in our portfolio that kind of came out of pivots. One company's OnSites, used to do AI video analysis for the intelligence community and the DoD. They pivoted to basically doing video analysis for physical locations where the accurate count of people, where they go and what stores they go into, it is really important. And the tech that they've developed for the IC and the DoD, they're applying that and bringing life back to shopping malls and hotels and stadiums. Halcyon also had roots in the intelligence community. They spun out a company dedicated to stopping ransomware. And that was so much so that they actually spun out a whole separate company. Conceal has its roots in the browser isolation space, and they kind of pivoted to a browser that filters threats in your web browser, a browser plugin that is, and they'll use the isolation if they encounter something that's a threat and hostile. And lastly, Scythe was spun out of a company called Grim, where they did amazing consulting for a wide variety of customers, and they spun out Scythe to do the ultimate in breach and attack simulation and malware and adversary emulation. So these spin-outs happen, these pivots happen. They're a real thing. If you talk to any venture capital person out there, they're going to tell you that they're hard to do and they're hard to focus on. But when the focus is done and is transformational, it can be great for the customers, the business, and the technology. So if you want to see more of this kind of video, please subscribe to us here at the Gula Tech Adventures YouTube channel. Come check us out on LinkedIn or visit us at gula.tech. I'm Ron Gula. Thanks for watching and good luck on your pivot.